Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs. I'm your host, Team Albers Daily. Joining me this week is one half of McLaren's extremely dynamic duo, Tanner Foust. We caught up recently to chat about how he got involved with Extreme E, what it's like working alongside Emma Gilmore, being a Hollywood stunt driver for John Wick, and much, much more. So without any further ado, let's just get straight into it, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, Tanner. Thanks for being here today. First of all, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much.
So, first question I like to ask everyone I talked on here: what first got you into motorsport?
I getting into motorsport for me, I was kind of an unlikely racer. I came from a family of doctors. I would have been the eighth in a row in my family.
My definitely broke the trend then.
Yeah, for sure. And it was, I was a big fan of cars. I loved cars. I remember the first moment going from Colorado Boulevard to Hamden Avenue in Colorado, sitting in the right seat of my dad's old 912, hearing the tires squeal for the first time. And I was 5 years old, wondering what the hell that was. And I paid attention to absolutely every gear shift corner since then. So that was a love for cars that was deep, but never had a connection to motorsport. And without knowing somebody or even going to a race, it's really hard to visualize that as a viable living.
Yeah. It's just something that's watched on TV at the weekend rather than actually getting involved.
Yeah. And you don't understand the business behind it. It's hard to see the steps between you and there. And I ended up, when I was in school, I studied to be a doctor and graduated with a biology degree. But before I graduated, I had worked for an inventor who invented amusement rides and kind of got I was a bit of a guinea pig for that guy on the rides, which was fun, scary, but more importantly, you got exposed to the entrepreneurial mindset. And it's really contagious when you hang around somebody who learns to just take what they think is the most fun thing to do and then figure out how to make a living doing it. That's a super contagious attitude. And for me, it was driving and skiing were my two favorite things to do. And so my dad was a ski racer and never seemed like a real viable career, but for just a few. But with the racing, I got a job as a mechanic, or I volunteered as a mechanic on a race team near my college in Boulder, and was a terrible mechanic, but I volunteered for like 8 months in order to earn enough time to get my license in SCCA, which is very club level racing in the US, and do a race or two and get my feet wet and figure out, what the next direction was.
Turned out better at the driving than the mechanics then.
Yeah, thankfully. And honestly, the first couple of races, I knew. I knew that, especially having a biology degree, I knew the limitations from like a human standpoint. I knew the human issues that we deal with and the fact that we're not natural drivers. We're natural runners, but not drivers. And so I knew that first race or those first couple races, I was going to figure out, can I learn this fast enough that, I can keep under a budget? Or am I not going to have a propensity to learn this quick enough and I need to figure out something to do?
I'm going to say at that point, you probably had a bit of a, not even really a head start in comparison to other people who have motorsport from such a young age, especially these days. So you're glad that you had that ability straight away then, more or less, because otherwise it would have been very difficult.
Yeah, I'm a believer that people aren't really born with any kind of driving ability. They're born with like an aptitude to learn. And I think playing with BMX bikes, in Scotland when I grew up, we'd go ride our bikes around on the ice and snow. And I got to drive from a very young age there. I was driving at 10 years old. My mom let me drive back and forth to school on part of the land where police weren't allowed to go. But it was and then frankly, being a bit of a hooligan. As a teenage driver in the States, we get our licenses at 16 and it's quite young. And sometimes you don't have the best decision-making capabilities before you have even any driving abilities. So you get away with stuff, and I got away with stuff, and I learned some lessons the hard way. I had the biggest crash I've ever had in a Honda Civic. I rolled that thing 7 times. When I was 18 years old. And, if you get away with those hard lessons, then hopefully you actually take the learning benefit. But yeah, so I'm not saying that I learned to drive on the streets, or anything like that. It's just that
life experiences, maybe.
Yeah, I think I definitely learned a respect for driving, and I learned a respect for momentum and inertia. And that respect really helped me learn how to go quickly, because I didn't have go-karting, and I didn't have a lot of the things that a lot of racers get from a young age.
And so it sounds from that then that you learned pretty quickly where the limitations were and how far you can push it a bit, which perhaps explains why immediately, it would seem from what we've seen so far, you fit into Extreme E so well. How did that come about, and what made you want to get involved there?
Well, I've been lucky to be involved in a variety of motorsport, and Extreme E strangely kind of uses a mixture of several of them in its format. It's kind of like drifting, not in a car control standpoint, but in a format where drifting is a sport that is incredibly technically difficult behind the wheel, but you're scraping walls, and basically with drifting, the closer you come to crashing, the better your score, because it's a judge sport. Where in rallycross, in rallycross, it's a full sprint and it's only by the clock, but you are pushing door to door. And so it's like drifting in one way, rallycross another. I've done a lot of Baja racing where you're actually, reading big terrain, and it's terrain that can break the car with one hit. It's not like you're doing lap after lap and eventually you're going to beat the car down by hitting curbs too hard. It's like one hit at one time and you're toast. So it's those things all put together, and in Extreme E, which I was drawn to that. Obviously drawn to McLaren as a team. They're legendary. I mean, who could not?
I don't imagine they had to ask you twice there, did they?
Right. And the closer I've gotten to the team, and the more I've learned, and the more I've been integrated, the more impressed I am just with the camaraderie and the teamwork that goes on, not just the engineering prowess and the resources and the building. It's all the things that you'd expect to be great, but the way that the team does it in a fun way and pulls together in the same direction is really what its asset is over at McLaren. So, and just the straight up the people that they have, that's been amazing. And then of course the Extreme E is unique in that it's gender neutral, carbon neutral, EV vehicles. I've been somebody who, since those days of SCCA, racing back in the US, or learning my lessons on the street, since those days, it's been a lot of motorsport. And I'm a real believer in motorsport, and a real believer that in the last 100 years, motorsport has changed all of our lives for the good through reliability and efficiency and safety of cars that we drive daily. And I do also think that motorsport's at a transition period right now, where manufacturers are able to create content, tell their story on some videos, make sure that enough people see the videos that it is a good return on investment, and then they don't have to worry about losing. They don't have to worry about seeing their car roll. They don't have to worry about all the bad parts about motorsport.
There's always a way to spin it.
Yeah, it's cheaper to do that than to go race against other people. But without that head-to-head competition, you lose the innovation, you lose pushing the boundaries of safety, performance, reliability, all those things. So if we can't prove that an EV model works, that somebody can make money doing it, that the boundaries can be pushed, that it's good for the manufacturers, then I think motorsport goes away. So I think it's a pretty critical time to prove that we're going to make EV cars better, which are in our future, by keeping motorsport alive.
Definitely. And you're saying as well that the people were an integral part of this as well, and your teammate is Emma Gilmore for this year. What's the dynamic been like between you two?
It's been awesome. Emma's great. She's very fast. We both have experience in slightly different areas. While I did do stage rally, I haven't done nearly as much stage rally as she has. And so when we do the track walks, there's good input from both directions. It's a really small footprint that you have as part of the carbon neutral thing, where we have a very small team that goes out to these. It's not hundreds of people like F1.
So it's just so impressive with what they can do on a turnaround. Like if something does go wrong with the car, you don't have just like hundreds of people there to do it. You've got a very small team, and they still manage to get it done.
It is a small team, and so everybody has to bring their strengths, and things that aren't their strengths, they need to put pride or whatever aside and absorb information from somebody else where that's their strength. You know, it really is a culmination of a tight group. And Emma brings a lot to the plate, which is great. Plus, she's also raced in the series before, which has been invaluable information and really helped us in Saudi.
I was going to say, you had a pretty strong weekend in Saudi Arabia overall, minus the DNF at the end. But I mean, you made it all the way to the final up to that point and was still looking fairly strong. What was the whole experience like for you over the course of the weekend?
I mean, it was like driving on a different planet, of course. If you look at any of the footage, it's just and imagine that everything is twice as grand, you know, in reality. It's
so I imagine that drop at the end was just even more ridiculous in person.
I raced an engineer on foot up that at the end, and it was like 10 steps just to move one step forward. It was so steep. It looked like it was steeper than 45 degrees, which looked impossible that the sand could even stay at that angle, but it was a drop. And yeah, there literally a back broken. I mean, there were, Kevin Hansen there. I mean, it's a serious course. And so there is a lot of pushing the car way harder than it should be pushed in order to get a time out of it. And in order to win in that event, you do have to take some risks that seem crazy. But I think our performance was good. I think split times, we were both good, Emma and I. I think we had, unfortunately, in qualifying, where there's such a short format, okay, you only drive twice a day.
Yeah.
And very limited driving. So if something goes wrong, it sets you back, way back. It makes for a really long weekend. And we had a red light situation, which was just a malfunction on the battery during qualifying, which took us from second place to last. And then that puts us into a last chance qualifier called the Crazy Race. And it's called the Crazy Race because only one person moves on. So everybody's absolutely sending it everywhere. It's just carnage.
So if they're trying to take even more risk, it's then, and that's not when you need that in from the competition. You need that for yourself.
Totally. And there are a lot of teams that haven't made it to the final after a whole year of racing, or there are teams that haven't made it. And it's so you have got that looming, and Zach's there, out for the first event, and he's, seeing what all this stuff's about. And so it was great to make the final. We didn't, when you win the Crazy Race, you're the last qualifying position in the final, which is not chosen really left to right. It's really chosen by the amount of grip.
It's not necessarily a disadvantage, that one, depending on how that goes for them on the.
It's depending how good the data is. Like when people go out there, they rank their spots. Okay, spot number 2 is the best. Spot number 4 is the second best. They rank their spots. So when they get their choice, they know which order to, when to pick the next one. And so theoretically, you get the last spot, which is theoretically the worst surface. In this case, the deepest, softest sand. But if the data is bad, or if it rains and equalizes all of the starting, then maybe it's not a bad thing because you are side by side. But in this case, it was a bad starting spot. And I think we're 4th or something going into the first few corners. And I'm used to driving in the dust, sadly, because rallycross, especially in the US, has become quite a dusty affair. And kind of the method that I have sometimes in the dust is you sort of look above the dust cloud of the lead car or the cars ahead, and you kind of see the direction you're going, get the car kind of pointed that way before you get in the dust, and then you can just go flat right through it. And so I had my line, and I knew I was pointed the right direction, and so I just stayed flat through this dust. The car in front of me checked up and got a little crossed up on some bumps, and I ended up just grenading that car. It was a big surprise for everybody.
From the onboard footage, you only see it when it's too late. Then it's like,
it's just I couldn't believe it. And then once the impact happened, it turned the car sideways enough. And I mean, if you're not perfectly straight on the bumps on these things, then you're just, it's a big roll. So it was a bummer. I feel really bad, because it felt like a victory when the whole weekend when we won the crazy race.
You say,
right? We were
like, to all the odds, you finally get there, and then that happens. It's kind of like,
yeah. But that's the whole up and down roller coaster ride that we, love about motorsport, as long as you can get back on the up sometime. And so I have no doubt that we're going to have a great car when we get to Sardinia and whole new surface. I do have some experience with sand, so maybe that was a bit of an advantage there. So maybe Sardinia, we're going to be swimming upstream again, but there's no doubt.
It'll be interesting to see what knowledge you can transfer over so each stage is different from the last one in a completely different way. And I mean, even from last year's Sardinia track, it's slightly different this time, hopefully, so it's not as much of a car breaker. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds there, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this series is I don't think there's not really a lot of memorization involved from previous years. Plus, the car is going to be different. We're on a new suspension from Foust that will have different amounts of travel and will hopefully be better. A new steering rack. There's a lot of little points in the car that are possibly a weak link that are getting addressed. So that potentially could be great and could help the drivers push a bit harder, without being up against basically a crash.
Well, fingers crossed you make it to the end this time. It'd be nice to see you in the final and get all the way to the end of the very least. So.
It would be awesome. It's been a great experience, and I really think it's a great sport for, like I said, pushing motorsport as a viable thing that can carry through the future. It doesn't just have to get extinguished with combustion cars. It can be something that we can benefit
as long
from.
as the racing is exciting, then I think that's all fans care about at the end of the day, and Extreme's definitely proved that.
Yeah, it's not as easy to find in the US as it is around the rest of the world, with Sky being so prominent nationally. But friends and family that did watch it here, they had universally never seen it and were amazed at the show. And that's something you always worry about. You go there and you're like, oh my gosh, this place is insane. This is never going to come off as cool on TV as this, and putting things on the screen is difficult. But with Andrew, and I mean, I think the announcing team was amazing. I mean, they do a great job of capturing in-car footage pretty quickly. Yeah. Even in a nearly live kind of situation. The technical issues they have to deal with such a big track and such a strange location. I mean, they really do an amazing job.
Thank God for drones.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And having the POV drones now that are able to keep up. It changes everything. And so I've heard from friends and family, I guess the moral of my story is that it's a super exciting thing to watch. And that is such a key cornerstone in, building a foundation for a successful motorsport. So it's great.
So away from motorsport, then you've been a stunt double / stunt driver for lots of TV shows and films like Fast and Furious and CSI Miami. How did all of that come about?
My career's always been kind of three posts. It's been really racing as the main one. I got into TV presenting when I was doing drifting and did a number of shows, including the US version of Top Gear on History Channel. And then stunt driving for films and commercials. My first stunt driving gig was a racer buddy of mine in rally racing. This guy, Reese Millen, son of Rod Millen, who's a famous Kiwi racer. And Reese put me on Dukes of Hazzard, which was a show that I grew up watching. And I was Billy Prickett, who was the bad guy. I was a police officer. I did all the stuff. And then Reese wasn't available to do some of the reshoots for the first 15 minutes of the movie, I got to drive the General Lee. And that was like a dream come true. I mean, I grew up watching that thing ripping roosters.
Moment there.
Yeah, oh yeah. Are you kidding? I mean, I had to wear a beard because I am incapable. But the ripping the General Lee around Hazard County was pretty amazing. And so been really lucky to do a lot of driving. The last one that I did, I actually didn't drive much. It was for John Wick 4. And it was mainly training Keanu. I really didn't need to even I did put the wardrobe on and all that kind of stuff in case he wanted me to jump in there, but he did pretty much all the driving himself. And some of it's super technical and it looks amazing. So that was a new thing for me to basically work myself out of a job, but it was really fun to watch.
If it was going to be anyone, you can kind of understand it being him though, especially on the films.
Oh yeah, if you consider all the stuff, the amount of training he does for gun work and fight work, and even horse work, and then to do the driving,
so it was awesome. Used in those films, so it's not surprising that he's trying to throw himself into as much of it as he can.
Oh my gosh, it's just incredible and this is normally not my world where I get to have an idea about it would be cool if, and then come up with something, and then fast forward a month or 2 months after some training and after blah, 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 it goes on. And then all of a sudden you're on set and there's 200 people all trying to make your idea look as cool as possible. And there's the best lighting guy in the world. And there's an amazing director. And there's, all this incredible team of people trying to make your idea look super badass. And you just walk away from the night. I don't know why that was so satisfying. That was super, super cool to see it just come together better than you even visualized. And, so I get why directors and, stunt coordinators and stuff do their thing. I don't do it very often, but that was a project that was fun.
And so it probably makes you appreciate it more if you don't do it that often as well, than when you can just really fully immerse yourself in there.
It's one thing to be it's cool if this, but then you really you have to connect all the dots from where you left off to where you're picking up after that. And then every frame, a sequence, it has to follow the story and be correct and be realistic and be the right thing that the characters would do and blah, blah, blah. And it's, where's it going to be in the real world? And where's the camera going to be? And it's cool. I really like that part of movie making. I've always liked the technical driving side. My favorite movies are Tokyo Drift, and some strange movies you probably didn't see. There's one called Red Dawn. That's a remake of the Patrick Swayze movie. Sometimes it was Chris Hemsworth, which obviously I was a perfect double for. But it was a similar stature and muscle build. There's he's 6'5" and 250 pounds, so it's not really, but it's a thing where the big budget movies, they have money to crash everything. And so sometimes they're not the most fun. You get the medium budget movies where they need to make the driving last and they need to have the character be a certain attitude behind the wheel and show that they're building skill, or show that this is one of their character traits. And then you get to kind of act behind the wheel and, kind of mimic what they would do as a character. And then that's cool. And you don't have to just necessarily crash stuff all the time. I can do that in Extreme E, I guess. Sorry, Zach.
I'm going to say then as well, you've won a number of different races over different categories in your career. Is there one that stands out more than any of the others?
I think Rallycross, the last Rallycross championship in 2019 was a big one, just because Volkswagen, I was racing for Volkswagen, they had pulled out. And so we didn't have manufacturer support. We just basically had a car and a bunch of spare parts. And doing it against teams that were spending, multiple millions and doing it for kind of pennies, that was kind of good feeling, because I'd been on the other side of that where we kind of had the Goliath team and then you're just expected to win.
Underdog feel to it then.
Yeah, the underdog feel. I spent a number of years in drifting trying to maintain status as the underdog, because it was always is a judge sport. And there was always something a little cooler about coming in as the underdog. But there was a time there where winning a couple drift championships and X Games and some rally stuff, all kind of the same. It was some busy years there doing full championships in Europe, full championships in the US, 150 days of filming on Top Gear a year. And there were some crazy times and almost some of those championships are just a blur, because I was traveling 320 days a year for almost a decade. And it's when you're that cranked, you just sort of walk out of the race weekend if you win it, and you celebrate it, and then you change and you go to the airport. And it's like, everything sort of happens quickly. It's not like when it's one race every 2 months. If you win that, you're reveling in that for a week,
So was there a point after all of that where you kind of just, it all hit you, then you're like, shit, I've just done all this?
One point about this, I've never said this before, but I've thought it a couple times in weird scenarios. I knew I'd gotten a certain point in my driving career when I was doing something for camera and I stalled the engine, and I didn't care, because I'd proven myself enough that so what, and keep going. But as I remember, always being that kid that didn't come from racing, and I was playing in their playground, and trying to do well in their playground, but it's always when you always have something to prove when you're up and coming, kind of a thing. And once I didn't feel like I really had anything to prove, that it was you're still hungry, you still want to win, you still don't want anybody else to win. And but I remember when I stalled one time, I was like, wow, I just don't care, and that's fine. You're not gonna get that. You may or may not be able to relate to that, but it's that I do remember that moment when I didn't feel like I necessarily had anything to prove. And that was I would never say that I'm complacent. I'm hungry and ambitious all the time. And it's been like that for a long time. And I don't feel like that slows down, but
just reassuring to know that you don't have to do everything perfectly every single time, so that you can make the odd mistake and it's not going to be the end of it.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. It's like you get over a little bit of a hump in your career where, you're not as good as your last race.
Yeah.
And that kind of pressure on racers, that lasts for years. It
can take so long to get your foot in the door that you panic then that any one small thing could spell disaster for it. So when you don't have that pressure so much, then it's refreshing in a way, maybe.
Yeah. And the type of motorsport that I do is different than a lot of stuff in Europe. There's 4-year, like Lando with a 4-year contract and things like that. At a high level, Formula One, even in the US at high levels, IndyCar and NASCAR, there's multiple year contracts, because generally those teams are the ones doing the sponsorship sales. The teams are the ones hiring the driver. And a lot of the sports that I've been doing, I've gone out and become an ambassador for a Rockstar energy drink, an ambassador for different companies, and formed long-term relationships with those companies. And then a manufacturer or not, and gone to a team and offered a package to the team that sometimes involves money, sometimes it just involves marketing and creating content with the partner's help, and just getting creative with business to make it work. So even off the track, you have everybody's value is covered. If you win, it's a bonus. But if you don't, it's everybody's, the marketing director at Rockstar or whatever is not going to lose his job because you didn't win the race. So by doing it that way, I've been with Rockstar for 18 years. I've been with some companies nearly that long also. And you can have long-term relationships. It's just a different business structure as a racing driver that is more common in the US than in Europe, where you're plucked out based on your results, which I love in Europe, that motorsport is a big enough machine that you can be just plucked out of results and hired and be a professional driver and basically get a paycheck to drive and go where they tell you to go. But it is a bit different. And so, but it is kind of, you don't have the super long-term contracts, but you hopefully have a long-term value for those companies.
Yeah, there's just at least potential for something down the line, and there's kind of less pressure in that way to always having to perform and impress. So if something does go wrong, then it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and this is the advice I give to people that want to get into motorsport. Usually is to form a relationship with the companies that are already involved in the sport. Because it's based on trust. There really is a marketing director, a person that has a family and a mortgage, and they don't want to risk anything for somebody they don't know. So if you can set a guide for them or a business plan that has an easy way out for them, where they're not going to get in trouble if you don't win, and it's still good value, then it's more likely they're going to say yes.
Perfect advice right there. A couple of fun questions that are completely unrelated to finish off with. If you were offered $50,000 to dance for 2 minutes with no music in a stadium full of people, would you do it? And what kind of dancing would you do?
Obviously break dancing, and I'd do it for half that.
Well, I'm going to have to make that happen at some point now, then, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be stretching for 10 minutes beforehand, just because, breakdancing's hardcore. And
I was going to say, if you're going to do it properly.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to mess around. I'm going to get elbow pads, everything. But it's going to be, yeah, absolutely. You kidding me? You can do a lot of damage with 50 grand.
And then final question, if you weren't in motorsport, would there be another sport you'd love to be a professional in?
I mean, I loved skiing growing up. I loved playing tennis. But if the racing didn't work out, I remember that I had already decided I didn't think I really wanted to be a doctor, even though once I graduated university, I really thought I could bury myself into architecture, which sounds weird, but I really liked, for that inventor, I built the architectural models. And so I got some exposure to architecture through even just buying materials from model builders in the Boulder area, which there are a lot of architects out there. I really liked architecture, and I could see kind of getting into that. But other sports, maybe skiing.
So skiing seems like a natural one there for you. From
I loved skiing. It's just again, that's one that I didn't grow up doing much racing as a kid, so it would have been an uphill battle for sure.
So, but again, not a bad way to spend your time if you had to.
Yeah, they get a short season, unless you're traveling in New Zealand, which I think the top ones all have to. But yeah, I always loved that.
You got to take that bullet.
Yeah. Now skiing. I mean, I'm actually going skiing tomorrow, which is great thing. And I've kind of fallen in love with flying, like general aviation, small airplanes, not fancy stuff. But so I do have like a little, I call it a tractor with wings, and but it gets you to the slopes quickly, and so it's
get to the point where you have a pilot and then you can just jump out the side straight onto the slopes. Then
I feel like a video in the making right there.
That's all I'm saying. When that comes out, I'm taking credit for that one. That's all.
You should take credit for it, absolutely. Unless something bad happens, then maybe just walk away.
Fingers crossed that we won't have to have that conversation.
Fair enough.
We could be chatting here for ages, I feel like, with everything you've done, but I'll let you go now. And thank you for being here today, and best of luck with the rest of Extreme E for this season.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Tanner for coming onto the Kerbs with me, and I wish him and McLaren the best of luck for the rest of the 2022 season. Join me again soon when I'll be chatting to another famous face from the world of motorsport. And in the meantime, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and check out the other videos on the On the Kerbs YouTube channel. You can also listen to me talk about Formula 1, amongst other things, over on the Undercut podcast, also on YouTube. Away from all that, you can follow me over on Instagram at t.albers.daily.onthekerbs, and read my various motorsport articles over on Is It Fast, Paddock Sorority, and Supercar Blondie. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next week for the next episode.